Let's do it. Yep. All right, good evening everybody, and welcome to Adam and I's webinar on leadership in the workplace for all the Diploma of Business students out there. Obviously tonight what we're going to be looking at is we are going to be looking at the second half of the resource material, or the last two learning activities for leadership in the workplace. So hopefully by the end of the session you'll have enough information to be able to complete those last two learning activities, which are enhancing the organisation's image and making informed decisions. So what we've done is we've uploaded the last webinar up there, so you should have all access to all three of the webinars around all the two webinars around the learning activities for this particular unit. And next week Adam and I will take you through a continuation of this, and we will talk you through, we'll give you a bit of an idea and an overview of the assessment requirements for this particular unit. But as I mentioned, as I mentioned, we're obviously going to focus on those last two learning activities tonight, which is enhance organisation's image and make informed decisions. So, Adam, is there anything further you'd like to add, or shall I open up enhance organisations' images?
No, I think we're right to go. Now, what students may remember last week, we were going through Section 1, Model 5 Standards of Management Behaviour, which was really just talking about leadership as a whole. So we were talking about just different elements of what makes up a leader. We were talking about the difference between a leader and a manager, you might remember. So this actually just trickles on from that conversation, but this is now just in reference, I guess, to sort of the organisation's image. So potentially, you know, leadership from an organisational point of view, so not from the individual perspective, but I guess from the organisational perspective. So we're going to be talking in this section, and we're going to be talking about things like values and credibility, integrity, ethics, business ethics, and I guess we'll just keep it a bit conversational, Alyssa, and if we come up with anything that we'd like to add or throw into the mix, we can do so. We are running this session tonight, just you and I, without students in the mix. I guess normally in a session like this, it would be really good to get individual stories from students about different situations that they've experienced when they've had I guess, an ethical dilemma at work or an ethical issue with work or something like that. These are things that are always good to talk about and just to try and sort of, you know, give some anecdotes and put some stories to. But in this situation, I guess you and I will do our best. So the first 6 questions, with all of the questions in this sort of section, you know, this section is talking about enhancing organisation's image. Yeah. So we're looking at things like values. We're looking at things like ethics, as we've mentioned, integrity and credibility. You know, what are these things? And how you fit in with that, I guess, as a worker as well. So maybe just to get started, Alyssa, I think if it's all right with you.
Yeah, of course.
I was just going to break down some of these words. Some of the different things. I've got a few. Yeah, I've got a few definitions of some of these things. So it might be a really good starting point just to sort of roll off a few definitions, and we can talk about each word and how it all sort of comes together.
Yeah, and share some of our own personal stories, even though we don't have students. But yeah, definitely, I think it'll give a bit of context to some of the questions. Yep.
Yep. Now, students will be able to watch this back on replay. We always like to post the video, but normally a session like this, you want to make it a bit more, you know, you want to integrate the students' stories. So the session, unfortunately, we can't do that tonight, but that's all right. We will try and make it as enjoyable as we can. So let's start off with the first word, I guess, that I want to talk about is the word values, or the word value. We hear about this a lot, this word. We hear about it a lot in a individual sort of sense, and it's something that also pops up in a business context as well. These are a couple of definitions that I've just pulled straight offline in relation to this word. And values is defined here as the regard that something is held to deserve, the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. So the regard that something is held to deserve, the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. That's just value.
Yeah.
All principles or standards of behaviour. So one judgment of what's important in life. That's the one that is the way that I sort of understand it. You know, what's important in life.
Yep, definitely.
Because that's how it manifests. You know, if something is really, really important to you, chances are it's one of your core values. Now, an organisation likes to have a set of values just like an individual has, and those values can be pretty sort of stock standard things. It could just be reliable, dependable. It could be honest and efficient. It could be innovative. That's one of their values. They want to be seen as somebody who values innovation, as somebody who's trying to be on the cutting edge, somebody, an individual. You might have a value of being humorous or being fun-loving or being creative. For me, have you done a bit of work yourself, Alyssa, around your own personal values or talking about values, things like that at all?
Definitely. I have a really strong belief system about making sure that you do align what your belief systems are in terms of your values with an organisation. I think as trainers and as assessors as well, I think it's important for us to really understand what we want and what we need and what our desire is to be able to give in terms of learning and development. And I think that's why for me it's always been really important that I do work with an organisation that shares my own values about things like quality of learning and quality of education and understanding individualism and being quite innovative as well. So I tend to align myself with organisations that also reflect what it is that I value most and what I believe in terms of my own, maybe my own values or my own code of ethics too.
Okay. Yeah. I've got a list here. I've got a few more I might just roll off. So I've got a list of about 50 different sort of values that people could align themselves with. So I think I've got words here like honesty. That's a big one that comes out. Intelligence. So you might value intelligence as something that is one of your core values. It's such an important thing for you. And a lot of your actions are sort of based around the fact that that's in your, your core beliefs, I guess, or core values. Service or spontaneity. Spontaneity is one of mine, actually. I really like, having that ability to be a bit free and spontaneous. Structures. That might be a value of yours. So to work in an organisation that has, very little in the way of sort of corporate structure and organisation may not work for you. So it's important to sort of understand how your values appeal. I'm going to keep going with these sort of definitions because I think then we can come back to some of these questions and just gloss over them a little bit. I want to talk about the word credibility.
Can I add
go on, sorry.
Can I add another value? I think as you kind of start to say some of them, I think it's really nice to kind of be able to listen to some of the values, and then I think you can connect as an individual to some of them. And I think that's really important about trying, if you're thinking about defining your own value system, some of the things that you say, you will as an individual really connect to. And things like creativity and for me as well, transparency in organisations. I'm a big believer of making sure that everybody understands and has the opportunity to I guess look at information and share information and be honest and open about who they are. So it's interesting as you go through them all, Adam.
You remember how last week we were talking about 3 levels of leadership, and we're talking about, I guess, that 3rd level of leadership, that area that you want to get to, where you're really trying to motivate and energize and inspire somebody on their core value system. So I brought up the word VABE, which is VABE, which stands for values, attitudes, beliefs, and expectations, and that's really the foundation of an individual human being. And if you can inspire somebody based on their core values, what they hold to be true, what their attitudes and beliefs and expectations are in life, then that's how you're going to be able to do it. That's how you're going to be able to motivate them on a long-term basis. Now, I guess the same thing goes here, and you're talking about, I think one of the questions talks about what do you do if your values are in conflict with your organisation.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and that's an interesting conversation, I guess, because really, if your values actually dictate your attitudes to things.
Yeah.
So everything comes back to values. We start with the word values because everything comes back to it's what you hold to be important. It's what you hold, to have any sort of worth. So your attitudes, the way that you act, what your beliefs are, the way you think, and then what you expect of other people. So the rest of that word is formed from your attitude. So that, if the values of the organisation out with yours, then what's going to happen is that your attitudes and expectations of other people are going to be out of line with what's happening as well. So that's where it starts to be a bit of a conflict. It's not even so much that your values, because I might say, then you can potentially have slightly different values, and that'd be okay. But it's what happens after that. It's how those values are manifested into your attitudes, into the way that you act, and the way that you expect other people to behave and act as well. That's where the problem typically occurs. So, some of the other values that people might connect with might be things like gratitude or generosity. Now, you might be a person who really likes to give, on somebody's birthday, if it's somebody that you know and it's a friend of yours, it's one of your values is to be generous, and if you didn't give them a little present or be seen to be giving them something, it would bother you. And that's probably because you've got a really strong value about generosity. And likewise, if that same friend doesn't reciprocate when it's your birthday, you feel a little bit bummed out because your expectations, the way that you expect other people to act, is formed from what your value system is. So if I value generosity, and it's really important to make sure that people see me as somebody who's generous, if my same friend doesn't return the favour, then things get a little bit out of whack there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are a couple other ones that, people might recognise or just connect with. Equality is a big one for me, Alyssa. So if around the house I live with a couple of other people, and we're all hard-working people, and I just I really push equality amongst the work around the house. It's a big deal. If I see that one person, even if it's not me, that's why I know this value is quite big. If I see one person doing more than what I would consider is to be their fair share of the housework, I get a bit annoyed. I say, look, this isn't fair. You really shouldn't be doing all by yourself. And likewise, if I'm doing more than I feel is what my share is, then I'll always say something. And I know that it bothers me because I have a value system of equality, and it's really important to me that things are, generally speaking, on an equal for everybody. And when things aren't equal, that's when my expectations are a bit out of whack with what's going on, and that's when problems start happening. So
yeah, I think
I'm going to keep going. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, just that conflict that you talk about, I guess in terms of, as you mentioned, I think that sometimes and if people, I guess, kind of can't understand or can't list what their personal values are, I think when you're in a workplace environment where you do feel challenged, or even in a home where you do feel challenged, or something really gets at you, or you've got that physical reaction, and emotionally you start to get a little bit restless or a bit agitated or angry, then as you said, chances are that there's a personal value that you hold that has been compromised. And sometimes you don't see it, and you don't see or you don't understand why you get so upset or you get so frustrated or angry, because you haven't connected with perhaps certain values that you do have as an individual. Yeah, it is very interesting, actually.
That's it. I mean, so always consider it. If you're expecting something of somebody else and they're just not living up to your expectations, chances are it's because, as you've just mentioned earlier, it's because of something. It's because of your value system. Because that your value system and the other person that you're referring to, their value system is slightly different. We all have different values. We have to understand that we're all different people, and that's really important.
Yeah.
But I guess what we're talking about when we're talking about this subject, or we're talking about business and life in general, it's really important to understand what your values are.
Yep.
Just generally speaking, so that you can make sure that you align yourself with others that have a similar sort of attitude and expectation. So, and that's really why we talk about it in a leadership sense as well.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to continue with a few other definitions.
Beautiful.
And then we can wrap up this first section.
Yeah, of course.
The other word the next word, there's a few words here. The next word is the word credibility. So just so students understand, the word credibility is the quality of being convincing or believable. The word is really being trusted and believed in. So if you're credible, if I think you're credible, Alyssa,
Yep.
it means I'm suggesting that I feel that you've got the quality that can be trusted and believed in.
Mm-hmm.
If I think you're credible, it means I believe in you, and it means I trust you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how to establish credibility?
Mm.
That's probably a long-term, a long sort of discussion, that one. A little bit about, how do you build leadership skill and things like that. Sort of similar stuff as well. I mean, the key for me, the key word I think about when trying to build a better credibility is just authenticity. You've got to be authentic. The second that somebody smells that, hang on a sec, I feel like he's acting a little bit outside of his range, so to speak, as soon as you stop acting in an authentic manner, you're going to stop becoming credible. And obviously, if you were to say anything that was dishonest, well, you're gone. That's the first thing. So honesty and authenticity are the two sort of descriptors that make up the word credibility when we talk about credibility. And we're going to keep moving along. Integrity, that's the other word that pops up here.
Great word.
So integrity, well, I guess, yeah, integrity and ethics are the next two words I want to talk about. Integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. So integrity is almost a combination of ethics and credibility, I guess you could say. So it's another definition is the state of being whole and undivided. Now that's a really nice way to explain it. The state of being whole and undivided. So if I'm acting with integrity, then I'm acting in the interest of whatever I'm acting in. I'm not acting in the interest of 6 or 7 different people. I'm not sort of trying to balance my interests, as it were. I'm completely undivided. I'm completely whole with my actions. And it's also the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles as well. Now, ethics also is about moral principles, and it's in reference to the moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. That's an interesting another way of explaining it. So the guys will probably be familiar with the term ethical dilemmas, or the word ethics, moral dilemmas, sorry, the guys will probably be familiar with the term moral dilemma. Now an ethical dilemma is also known as a moral dilemma. So they have the same sort of one and the same sort of thing. So if people are trying to understand the word ethics, think of the word, moral dilemma, when you've had a moral dilemma. And a moral dilemma is usually a situation where there's a choice to be made on two options, and neither of which resolves a particular situation in a completely acceptable fashion. It may not be a win-lose situation. Just it might be a which way do we go with this one? There's not really two winners in this sort of situation. It becomes a moral dilemma or an ethical dilemma as well. So you can think about it in that way. I guess another way of trying to describe ethics is looking at what the opposite of that. So being unethical, well, the word unethical is referring to lacking those moral principles, or unwilling to adhere to proper rules of conduct, or not in accord with the standards of a profession. Now that might be an interesting way to look at it in terms of business. So, and it's not necessarily to say that you're breaking the law if you're being unethical, but what you're doing is you may not be acting in the best accord or in the best level or standards that you could. So some examples here of unethical behavior, you might be deliberately deceiving other people in the workplace. You might try and take credit for work that somebody else has done. You might try and deliberately sabotage somebody else's work, or you might try and pinch the sales of somebody else if they're not aware. Here's an example here where your manager calls you into his office and threatens to fire you unless you sell 50 large toasters, and now the large toasters are an inferior product and you've been selling the small toasters to your company instead. But to keep your job, you must violate your conscience and recommend to your... So there's like an ethical dilemma. It's a moral dilemma. You don't really want to sell these toasters. They're not good.
Yep.
that you've been sort of told to go off and tell them. Now that's a really common ethical sort of dilemma in the workplace. That happens a lot. Listen, do you want to share any stories of yourself, examples of things that you may have experienced in business and life that might refer to ethics or credibility or anything?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like I did work for an organisation where I was also a trainer and an assessor, back then in the day, it was that you know, training was delivered more so to I guess bring in and generate revenue than it actually was for educational or development processes. And I have a very strong ethical stance and moral stance on how I think training should be delivered and how it should benefit an employee as well as an employer. And I know it is about generating revenue, but it's also about the development and offering additional skills to an employee. And I was asked by one organisation to make the process go a lot quicker than it should have been. So hence perhaps ticking through or ticking boxes that when maybe assessments hadn't been completed or been deemed competent, and it did really and it was one of those things where you get stuck because you know that it's the wrong thing to do. And I remember in that situation, I held this principle of I had such a big moral dilemma and such a big ethical dilemma because I didn't want to do it, and I got really upset in the workplace. Like I went and spoke to my manager at the time. I made a very, very big complaint about the way it was being handled and what I was asked to do, and I eventually ended up ceasing employment with that organisation because, first of all, you know, it had such a moral and ethical dilemma, but I did not want to put myself in a situation where I was going to compromise compromise myself. I don't want to be a person that is known as a tick and flicker. I want to be a person that you know, shares information and you know, creates a journey for a person in terms of education. And this organisation didn't share that particular stance. So for me, there is no other decision to be made other than to go and align myself with an organisation that truly believed in that. Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I've got an example where I worked for an organisation that that they wouldn't. It wasn't a case of lying. It was more of a case of cleverly not disclosing a full body of information, which I had a bit of a problem with because I felt it was just a bit of an you know, an ethical issue. It was a moral dilemma that I really was sort of struggling with. You know, it was effectively, you know, charging clients a lot of money. It was an advertising venture, and there was sort of a promise of there'd be, you know, X amount of people that are in the industry that are reading that particular product. Now, it was sort of executed, the message was executed as if the product was printed out. It was like a magazine. It wasn't. It was a digital production only. And the readership was a purchase thing. It's something that's known in the industry. You can actually go ahead and purchase contact distribution lists, they're called. And they purchased a distribution list, didn't really maintain it at all, and advertised to everybody they've got one of the best readerships in the industry. It's all incredibly, you know, this is their selling point basically. And so what we were saying wasn't actually lying, but it was just very crafty. It was very, very crafty. And I just had a bit of an issue with working there after a while. I just thought, you know, I just didn't see the value in their product. But there wasn't any, to be honest. I didn't see the value in the product, and I had a difficult time being too tricky because really at the end of the day, if I was being too honest with customers, I would lose the sale. I would lose the sale. If I said to them, look, we don't know how many of them are actually actively reading the product. We don't track that information. You know, it's a digital-only production. We don't bother printing anything because it costs too much money. If I said that, never get a sale. Never get a sale. So, you know, I had to sort of act outside of my sort of morals because, you know, what was happening was that the more sales I have was effectively, you know, a direct link to how wonderfully deceptive I may have been, and I had a situation where I had a young guy just getting into business who needed a bit of help with marketing, and he was looking at me as somebody that can effectively assist him with that, and I was just charging an arm and a leg for really not a whole lot of value, and you know, those it sort of takes toll on you after a while, I think, you know. Yeah, just like it wasn't the place that I wanted to be for a very long time, and I had some ethical issues with how they were going about things. So, not to say that they did anything illegal, and they didn't, not at all, not even close to. They were lovely guys to work for. I really enjoyed, you know, one of my more enjoyable sort of places to work in many ways, but just had a few issues with the, you know, it was a real kind of rock and roll sort of sales environment, I guess you could say. It was sort of just the attitude of let's make money and go and get 'em, tiger, sort of thing. But yeah, I guess that was an ethical issue I had with how things were done there. That's all. Should we move on to the second section, or do we want to quickly flip through some of these questions and see if there's anything that we've missed?
Oh, I think we've given enough, quite a good overview of, I mean, definitely we've covered the first 3 questions there. I think I'll just have a quick brief, but I mean, the first 3 questions I think have been covered quite substantially in the discussion that we've just had. And I think, yeah, definitely we've talked about integrity and credibility as well, that question 4. We've talked about the importance of ethical business values for the organisation and yourself, and how organisations can demonstrate ethical behaviour. I think there's enough information for the students to be able to answer these questions, Adam, so I'm happy to move on to the next section.
Well, that's actually interesting. Maybe that last question, let's just talk about how does an organisation demonstrate ethical behaviour? You know, what can an organisation do that just shows everybody, hey, this is a big deal for us. This is one of our values, or
yeah. And I think it comes through, actually, as you mentioned, you know, having an organisation that has defined values, having an organisation that has a really defined vision and a defined mission statement too, having processes in place where, you know, they address certain behavioural requirements, or, you know, they've got strong standings about how things should be handled, and you know, so I think they can do it by really owning and showcasing and using some of those strategies in the workplace or within an organisation, just defining who they are and what they stand for.
I like that explanation, defining who they are and what they stand for. I think because it really does depend on the business, because depending on the business depends on how they may choose to act or not act ethically, or not ethically. So I like what your last comment was there. For me, I think it's about having an understanding as a business what your impact is on your environment as a whole. When we say environment, everything that's outside of the business. So not only just the trees and the beautiful grasslands outside, but also other people and company and other companies that they deal with, things like that. So what is your impact on others? And that's a really good starting point to sort of go with. So it does depend on the actual business itself. Now let's move on to the next section, which talks a little bit about making decision making and making informed decisions.
Sounds good.
This one sort of chops and changes a little bit with its content. So what we might do for this one is just flip through question by question. Sure. We have 10 questions and we've got, I think, 25 odd minutes. So what we might do is just go through question by question on this one, if that's all right with you. So this is section 3.
Okay, cool.
Now remember, guys, the learning material does relate directly to that section. So the learning material for section 3, if you read through that, you'll have the information that you need to go through the 10 questions in this section.
Cool. All right. Okay, so
this,
yeah,
go for it.
I've just sorry, I was just going to say I've just loaded up the first few questions for this particular learning activity, and as you mentioned, Adam, it does kind of introduce a couple of different concepts, and I guess that very first concept, some of the first 3 questions really look at is the importance of things like gathering data and the importance of information and having information and collating data and information to be able to, I guess, showcase or even to be able to demonstrate leadership in the workplace. So those three really do kind of look at that. So should we talk about that for a little bit?
Yep, I think we can, and I'm just going to make the complete link again back to leadership, because again, this whole subject sort of around leadership, we talked about leadership as a holistic sort of subject at the start, and then now we've started talking about, I guess, business ethics, and its role in that sort of whole picture. What we're talking now is about decision making, this section, and I guess where leadership fits into it is that leaders are decision makers. You know, if you're a good leader, you're somebody who can make a decision. You're somebody who's open or able to take a risk, and you're somebody who can make a decision. So somebody who is not able to make any decision at any given time is lacking some leadership skill. It's really important to be able to make decisions. So we're talking about a little bit about how you make decisions and how it all sort of relates. So that's sort of the, I guess, the overarching thing that pulls it all together. The first section, we're talking a little bit about gathering data and gathering information, and I'm actually just going to read straight out of the learning material, if that's all right.
Yeah, yeah.
So what it actually says in the learning material is leaders and managers are problem solvers and decision makers. They both make small and large decisions. Decision making can relate to the need to resolve issues and manage problems, or take advantage of opportunities that present. And competent leaders and managers apply a logical, optimizing decision-making processes to determine the best optional mixture of options for their organization. In doing so, they'll utilize the ability to critically assess and evaluate ambiguous situations. They make judgments, resolutions, decisions based on experience, assessment of data, information to a certain extent, or intuition. So these are the ways that people are making decisions. You base it on your experience and intuition, but also data that's been presented to you. I'll continue reading here if that's okay. It says here, before a decision can be made about a problem, a potential problem, or issue or opportunity, the issue needs to be clearly identified and clarified. So before making a decision about a problem or a potential problem, the issue under consideration must be clearly identified and clarified. Now, data relevant to the proposed decision must be collected and collated. So this is how data sort of comes into it. We're talking about in relation to the decision-making process. So we need the data. We need the information to help us to make a decision. That information then must be assessed, must be analysed, and then you start the selection process, which I'm not going to go too much into. But that was sort of the preamble, I guess, for how it connects to leadership and how data sort of relates to it as well, the process. So the first question is asking, why is it sometimes a good idea to organise data in a chart form? Well, for me, really, that's just a visual representation of the information. For me, different people understand things in different ways, and if you're only explaining things in one way, you'll only appeal to the one set of people. So when you're making group decisions, when you're problem solving, quite often you're involving groups of people or others, and when you're presenting information, if you're presenting data to somebody, it's always good to present that data in a number of ways, because not everybody is just, you know, numbers driven and very sort of dry. It needs to be coloured up for some people to understand. So if you want somebody to understand your pie chart, or maybe not pie chart, but if you want somebody to understand the data that you're presenting, and 15% of customers say this, 10% say that, 8% of this, 15% are over here. If you want somebody to be able to really understand what you're saying, you might have to present that in a number of ways. You might decide to put a pie chart or a Pareto, a bar graph, a number of different ways that you can actually visually represent numbers, data, in that other people can get a much better grip on what the actual issue is. And as we know, data is one of the key things that we're drawing on when we're trying to make a decision about something. So you really want to make sure that there's no ambiguity when presenting data. So yeah, I think to remove any ambiguity, to cater for a range of people, these are the reasons why I would do it. Alyssa, did you want to add anything to question 1? We're going to keep going.
Yeah, no, and just to, I guess, reiterate and just to kind of build on from that as well, I think sometimes rather than just having a whole lot of data there in front of you, especially if you're in a meeting or if you're trying to, you know, justify changes or showcase areas for improvement, I think the simpler the data is presented, the easier it is to read as well, and you're not spending as much time kind of trying to decipher or go through all of this data, whereas you've just got the chart form is really good because it'll showcase the overall results of all of that data. So in terms of a time factor as well, I think, yeah, it could be another consideration as why it's also a good idea to organise data in chart form. Yeah.
Sounds good to me. Cool. Next question is asking what are some of the information needs of leaders and managers? So we know that leaders and managers are poised with having to make decisions. You know, so we know what the ways that they go, or what information they rely on. They rely on their intuition, their experience, but they also rely on data. So I guess what we're trying to sort of say is what sort of data? Yeah. The way I'm reading this question, Alyssa, is really, you know, what sort of data do leaders and managers need when, you know, trying to make decisions and resolve information. It obviously completely depends on what the decision that you're trying to make or what the actual situation problem that you're dealing with is. But students can happily just list how many minimum, how many you're looking for here, because it's really unlimited.
Yeah, there is. I mean, we could probably have about 5 here, I think, Adam.
I think a minimum of 5 would be good.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe if
you're looking at if you're looking to discover the new name for a new product, you know, what sort of things would you want to consider? What sort of things would you be asking? What sort of information would you like to gather when trying to work out the name for your new product? There's a good one to use if guys don't have they're trying to think of an example. Sorry, you were saying something?
Yeah, I was going to go for an example as well. So say, for example, you wanted to assess the productivity of your team members. I guess what kind of information might you need, therefore, that the workplace has to be able to gather data that will showcase the productivity of your team members?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So.
Okay. So question 3 is asking how can data and information be tested for reliability, accuracy, and currency? Well, firstly, do you want to talk about primary and secondary data at all, or is that a bit not in this sort of situation right here, right now?
Probably. I mean, I think if we explored that question a little bit, so how can data and information be tested for reliability, accuracy, and currency? You know, I think that in this day and age, that if you are on a fact-finding mission, or if you are looking at changing something and you're trying to gather your data, the more relevant it is and the more current it is, the better decision you're going to make. I think now a lot of things change quite dramatically, so data can obviously change its meaning or actually change itself overnight. So I guess if I was looking at this question, how can data and information be tested for reliability, accuracy, and currency? I could almost just do a random audit on some of the data that I was looking at as well. I might pick an area like a test area, just to see how reliable and accurate that specific data was, and it could be one small piece out of 10 larger pieces, and just do a test run or a test audit on a specific part of that data, really, and that would hopefully test it for reliability and accuracy.
Usually in the world of marketing, they have what they call sample sizes. I think that's the term they use in marketing, where if they're wanting to know, you know, what Australians feel about, you know, the newest variety of Big M. Yeah, okay, Goggle Box. I tell you what I think. It's horrible. Anyway, what they talk about is having like a sufficient sample size. If I ask 5 people, it's not reflective of the whole nation of Australia. However, if I ask 2,000 people, it is reflective. So depending on the size of the data, the sample size is really important. So if we have 500 customers and we ask one customer what they think about something, it's not enough, and it's not reliable. That data is not reliable if it's too small a sample, or if the sample of that data we're using is from one section of the data. So if I'm only asking females about what they think about my chocolate Big M and not males, I might not be getting my sample data is biased. If I'm only going to a certain area and asking, the richest people in Australia if they think that the $1.50 for the Big M is too much, the people that are earning, $300,000 a year are going to say probably not. And if I only ask that demographic what they think about the pricing structure, it's not going to give me it's not reliable.
Absolutely. And when one portion of data that gets tested is unreliable, it means that whole collection process and the information that you have reported on based on that data is now all compromised. So therefore,
absolutely.
So therefore, you're doing a collection exercise that you have to redo. So I guess in terms of that, it's quite important that you get that reliable, you get that accurate, and you get that current data.
Yep. Now where that, I guess when it comes to the word accuracy, I think about where that information came from. That's what I think about when I think about accuracy. Like, well, how do I know that that's true? That's that's what I would say. If somebody says, "Hey, Adam, guess what? Blah 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 blah," I'll go, "Okay, you've told me an opinion, and that's your opinion, and so I haven't seen that for myself. So I'm now relying on your opinion, and so all of a sudden, the accuracy of that data isn't first-hand; it becomes second-hand, sort of a thing." And currency, well, that just refers to current. Is it current? So if I say, well, hang on a sec, 80% of Australian housewives believe that chocolate milk is their most enjoyable after-dinner drink. And somebody will say to me, well, okay, when was that survey done? I thought it was done in 1940.
Yep.
Well, hang on a sec. In 1940, we had a different set of situations, and it's no longer current. So that information can't be used because it's referring to a time that is not relevant anymore. So I think we've done justice to those questions.
Yep.
Shall we move on?
Yes, we shall. Let's have a look at the next set of questions. All right, here we go.
Do you like that song?
I don't know. I don't even know what I was singing, actually.
Oh, there you go.
It was just my loading of the next set of series of questions with music.
It was like the loading music. Very good. Very good.
Oh.
Nice. Okay, cool. Question 4 asks, explain what leadership styles can be applied to decision making and the situations in which these styles might be most effective. So we want you to actually provide a bit of an example here. There's some examples in the actual learning material, so I'm going to let you guys go off and have a look at some of those examples. So what's actually saying here, what sort of leadership styles, so how are we going to get the guys to make a decision? So that's already what we're asking you. What are the different sort of ways that you can come to sort of forming an answer or forming a decision in something, and support your answer with a workplace example. If you can provide an example, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Alyssa, what are you sort of seeing with this one?
I guess I would try and look for a good example in the workplace to really kind of demonstrate this concept. So I guess if you were a leader and what style of leadership would best be used for basically making your decisions, or could be applied to decision making. So I think for me the examples are really what I guess makes the response, so that I can kind of see I guess how that concept is applied really.
So look, I think we might have to give the guys a bit of a preamble here. I guess because when we say leadership styles, it's kind of confusing for me because there are many different sort of leadership styles.
It is.
And I think what this is sort of saying is, in relation to making a decision, you can kind of go about it one of two ways, is what it's sort of saying. You can kind of go about it, and this is half giving the students the answer, but really the answers that we want to see is an explanation. of which situations they may work in, so that you can sort of back up your answer. So which situation is each of these two effective in? That's all. That's what I'd like to see, and an example would be great. So really what I'm suggesting here is that you've effectively got two styles where you've got that group decision-making process and you've got that, so you know, that sort of a democratic kind of process, if you like, versus the opposite of that. So where does, you know, really, where's the benefit in each of those sort of styles? You know, where is it inefficient to get everybody together to come and make a decision versus just making one and going, cool, that's what we're going to do here. And so really just discuss each of those two different ideas as generality.
Yeah, which kind of...
When is it good to bring everybody in together?
Which kind of
brings it not?
To affect question 5, actually, when it says, if you needed to make a decision about a work process or procedure, how would you go about involving the other members of your team?
Yep. So situations where you've defined that, yes, it's good to bring others in.
Yep.
Now this is the roll on from that. How are you going to go about getting others in? How are you going to go about doing that?
Yep, that's it.
So we'll leave that one to you to make that call.
All right. And then we finish it off with, why isn't it necessary to develop a number of different options to contribute to a problem solution? So if you do, I guess, and I mean, I guess as well, you know, having the group think type of decision-making process as well. I mean, this question is really asking you, why do you think it's important to have a lot of different options? If you've got a big problem and you're trying to solve it, what's the benefit of developing or having a large number of different options to be able to help solve that problem? You know, what do those different options give you? How do they contribute to a better solution?
Yep, that's good.
Perhaps it can, you know, if you were kind of trying to develop a number of different options and you went through a group think type of process, I mean, you could get ways to solve a problem that you probably had never even thought of. You know, it might be a matter or an instant where somebody comes up with a fabulous solution that you hadn't even considered, because you know you've shared the decision-making process or the problem with a lot of people, and you know you've got that consultation happening, and you get a variety of different answers.
Yeah. You know, like, I guess it's a case of if I only present one solution, what's the likely chance that that's the one that's going to be selected by the group? That's probably the only one that's going to be selected by the group. You give a group a few other options, and it's more likely that there's going to be some thought process into the actual decision, and then the right one is executed. There's many different sort of problem-solving techniques, and I guess there's many different sort of ways to make a decision as well, and so this is, I guess, part of it. So as consumers, if I'm going out to buy a new computer, a new laptop, there are many ways that I can go about the decision-making process. I might make a choice, my choice of laptop, simply based on the cheapest one available. I might look and go, you know what, I just want the cheapest one. I might say I'm looking at 3 different laptops and I'm weighing them up based on the screen size, the graphics, and the price. So I'm going to rate each of those out of 10, and the one that has the best rating out of 30 is going to get my result. Or it might say, well, I'm choosing the laptop. It has to be a minimum of 21 inches. If the screen isn't 21 inches, it's off my list, leaving just one computer out of the 3 or 4 to choose from, which is my final choice. So decisions can, you know, the way that you go about it can completely depend, and it completely depend on what the problem is that you're trying to solve, so to speak. Have you ever heard of 6 thinking hats?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Oh, I love this thing.
Yeah.
It's a critical thinking sort of collaboration, or a system of, it's a system of problem solving in a group situation, because what often happens is when you're in a group situation that you've got that human, there's a lot of sort of human elements that come into play. Like if I take a particular standpoint in our conversation, I'm like, oh no, I don't think we should do that, then I'm trying to defend my position, and I'm going to try and defend it pretty strongly, because, you know, that might be one of my things. And it may not necessarily be the best interest of the organisation. I might just be trying to argue with you and and win the argument, not even considering what the actual content is and if it's relevant or not relevant. There's a lot of reasons why I guess it's quite a practical thing. I'll go through it. The idea with 6 thinking hats is there's 6 hats, and everybody gets a chance to wear one of the hats through the process. Now, what happens quite often is you have some of those people in a group decision that are quite negative about things, and you have those that are quite positive. Now, both of those have their negatives as well. If I'm positive about every decision, well, that's not going to help. If I'm also negative about everything, that's probably not going to help either. However, it might be positive to discuss the positives and negatives. So what 6 thinking hats gets you to do, it gets you to think of 6 different categories. And there's 6 different colored hats for each category. So one is the process, one is the facts, one is feeling. So there's a hat that is designated just to talk about what your gut feeling is. And so, you know, when some people say, oh, I don't know, my feeling is this, and somebody says, well, look, the statistics say A, B, and C. They're talking about different things. One person's arguing logic over emotion. It's hard to have that argument. So 6 thinking hats goes, cool, we're going to actually give you 6 different areas to argue. So those people that want to argue and win the argument, they can win the argument on 6 different categories, and therefore we're going to get an absolute, neutral, well-constructed perspective on the actual issue itself. It facilitates that productive critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and enables each person's point of view to be included and considered. And it means that you actually argue against each element. So you get to say your part against, you know, what the benefits are, what the cautions are, what your gut feeling is. So at that point where there's a red hat which talks about emotion, when you're talking about emotion, you're wearing the red hat, you're not talking about facts. At this point, everybody gets a chance to say what their gut is telling them, or what their emotion says. What do I emotionally feel about this decision or lack of? So it's a really clever way of doing it. There are many different sort of techniques out there in terms of problem solving. I think it just depends on what it is you're trying to solve as to the best methodology to go for. Now there's actually 4 more questions in the set, so let's just quickly flip through those.
There it is.
Sounds like you've got chooks up there.
I've got some chooks. All right, so shall we have a quick look at question number 7? Well, decision making can be a risky business. Many are much better at procrastination than making and implementing decisions. What do you think are the elements of personal risk that contribute to this? Ooh.
Yeah.
So this is a bit of an interesting question here. I guess what the question's really asking, and from my perspective, Adam, is I guess it's basically saying that people can be quite hesitant about making decisions, especially when you know, the decisions might result in big changes. So I guess for me that question is taking that into consideration, and I guess personally, what elements do you have that perhaps might make you hesitant about decision making or making those decisions?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I'd be looking at. I mean, I think sometimes, you know, people might be fearful of, you know, making the wrong decision. I think people might be fearful of making a decision that perhaps other people won't embrace or change. You know, I think that people are might be hesitant about making decisions that perhaps might compromise organisational standards or those types of things. So I guess that's kind of what I would be looking at in terms of risk for this.
Some people have a, you know, we talk about values at the start of this, and some people have a value of being liked by others, and it's a really common value you see often in life. And people that really like to be liked by a lot of people often find it really hard in this situation to make decisions, because sometimes the decision may not benefit everybody. And when your value is to be friends with everybody, you just really struggle with the idea that I might be making a decision that may benefit somebody, but also may, you know, not be completely beneficial to somebody else. Those, you know, that's one of your values. You're going to have a hard time in this area, the decision making. It's not to say you shouldn't consider people's feelings and things like that. We talk about that when, you know, we talk about the the passive-aggressive continuum and things like that. But yeah, it's you know, this again, this is human psychology. We could talk about this. You know, we could talk about this all day.
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah, but there's some work and there's some material in the content guide. I'll let you have a bit of a sift through that.
All right, shall we have a look at those last couple of questions then? What are some of the things that leaders or managers should take into consideration when communicating decisions to employees? I think we've talked actually quite a bit about the importance of communicating information over the last few months, Adam.
Yeah.
So obviously, you know, yeah.
I'm just going to say something that you'll probably hear me say a lot of, and it's something called features versus benefits, and I love talking about features versus benefits. People want to know what's in it for me. What's in it for me? You know, when you're presenting anything to somebody, you've got to let them know what it's about, what's in it for them. People quite often present features. So a feature on a car is that it's got 4 wheels and they're 16 inches long, and the speedometer goes up to 105 and it's 6 gears. They are features. They're features only. The benefits of some of these features are that it's, you know, it's going to get your family home safely. You know, that's a benefit. Benefit is, you know, when you say that it's got a 2.3 litre engine, 6-cylinder, double shimmy whackers, that's not a benefit. That's a feature. The benefit is that it's economical to run. That's a benefit. So remember, what is in it for me? Just think about benefits, not features. So don't tell me what the features of the you know, the new mobile phone are. Don't tell me that you can dial numbers. Tell me what the benefits are. Tell me that my friends are going to, you know, be jealous of me. Tell me that it's going to mean that I can connect to anybody and be online and anywhere in the world in 5 seconds. And give me the benefits. Don't tell me the features. Sorry, that's it for me. A couple of other ones. Why are action plans necessary? Guys, we've done many discussions about goals and the relationship of action plans to goals, so I'm not going to go too much into that one. The last question here in this set, if the feedback from tracking indicates that a new process is not working well, as you would expect it to, what action should take place? Again, guys, we've done a bit of work there on, you know, feedback, talking about feedback mechanisms, talking about how to, you know, things that you can do if you get feedback that's not great. We've talked about it in a few subjects like make a presentation, planning, project planning even as well. So I'm probably not going to go too much in depth with that one. And what, I guess to answer this question, maybe just give us an example so that we can understand, rather than just giving us a generic, we'll try and do it better next time. Give us an example and give us an example of an action. I'm happy with that one.
Yeah, I think a lot of the areas and a lot of the concepts in this particular unit we've definitely covered in a lot more detail in some of the other units. This is almost like bringing all of those concepts together into one unit. So hopefully, you know, using the other information that you've received, you can definitely move quite freely through these particular activities here.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Okay, thank you very much for your attendance, everybody. We hope you got a bit out of the session. Look forward to seeing you in the session next week. This time next week we'll take you through all of the assessment tasks for this unit, and you'll be ready to complete the whole subject at that point. So thanks for your attendance. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Absolutely. Good night, everybody.